Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. And today we have our guest, Dr. Alan. He is a senior research assistant at FAW Center for Football Research and also an HCPC registered sports and exercise psychologist. His work covers a wide range of sports like young youth football, table tennis, triathlon, and yeah, he also worked last year, Paris Olympic. So welcome, Dr. Alan McKay. So to start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey to become a sports psych?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the nice introduction. It's always nice to hear someone else introduce you. Makes you feel good about yourself. Yeah, I guess my route through. I've been doing this for I think it's about 10 years now since I started my masters. I suppose to go back even further than that. As you can tell from the accent, I'm from Dublin originally, from Ireland. So I did a psychology undergraduate in Dublin City University in Dublin. Really, really enjoyed that. I always felt like I was someone who was always interested in the behavior of people and how people interact, and always kind of, good at developing relationships with people and trying to get to understand them and what makes them tick and stuff like that. But I was also passionate about sport, played a lot of sport growing up, rugby, golf, swimming. I'd literally watch anything, play anything I could put my hand to. So as I was finishing up that degree, I kind of thought, well, actually, why not try and combine those two passions? So that kind of led me to sports psychology. But at the time in Ireland, there wasn't really any accredited degrees, nothing that you can get accreditation for. Though it's the PSI, Psychological Society of Ireland. There was nothing that was accredited by them, and so I started to naturally look abroad and came over to the UK. So did my masters then at Liverpool John Moores for a year, which I really, really enjoyed. Kind of opened up my eyes to a lot of novel and different approaches. Probably one of my big influences while I was there was someone called Dr. Martin Esty, who kind of opened up my eyes to humanistic existential approaches to sports psychology. Coming from an undergrad psychology degree, I was very much psychology is, stats, quantitative stuff, control, experiments, stuff like that. So it kind of opened up my eyes to what psychology could be, the full kind of range of stuff. And then I suppose from there, I finished up my master's and then got a job down in Cardiff, then being a research assistant with the Football Association of Wales, working with Professor Brendan Cropley. And then that kind of snowballed into a PhD opportunity, which was specifically focused on two main things: looking at the demands players face making the club to international transition, and then helping them to develop their mental toughness. And then alongside that, for my sins, I decided to also do the stage two qualification. Someone who was kind of passionate about the applied side of things. And I was conscious that I didn't want to just be getting research experience and kind of leave the applied thing to one side. I wanted to do a bit of both. So as you said there, I kind of started doing my stage two. I was fortunate enough to get an internship opportunity with Team Wales and the build up to the Commonwealth Games back in Birmingham, I think it was in 2022. So working with Welsh triathlon and table tennis. And then since then, I've got a lot more range of experiences. Obviously, working with the FAW in football, working in swimming, working with lots of private clients across a range of sports: football, rugby, BMX cycling, taekwondo, Ironman, triathlon, and a whole range of different ages and backgrounds. And then finished up my PhD a couple of years ago, finished up my stage two last year. So my partner jokes that there's no more qualifications for me to do. I've kind of I've completed everything so far I could. Not to say that there's not a lot more learning still to do, because you're always learning and always developing. But yeah, I've basically done every possible degree I could do, and now trying to make my way in the big bad world. At the moment, working, as you said, as a senior research assistant with the FAW Research Centre, which is a really cool opportunity where we basically get to help staff at the Football Association of Wales who want to run research projects, help to support them with that. And then also, yeah, just continue on my applied work, still working in triathlon and doing a lot of private consultancy work, one-to-one stuff, group workshops, that type of thing as well. So yeah, that's kind of a whistle stop tour. I mean, I've probably talked for a good bit there, but in my view, a whistle stop tour of kind of my path to where I am in my career so far. And yeah, still kind of based down here in Cardiff then at the moment.
That's a lot to unpack there. What a
Yeah.
journey that is.
I kind of just got going and didn't stop. So there
Yeah.
you can
Where do
go
we
anywhere you
start?
want with that, but that's everything.
If we go back to like what made you decide to do your PhD and the practical side of stage two together at the same time? Because that obviously that workload would have been a lot. Or did you just want to get it done like as quick as possible?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't know if this is the right way of putting it, but I probably started at stage two for the wrong reasons. I really wanted to keep doing applied work. And I think even still now, applied work is probably what gives me the most fulfillment. Just that idea, if you could sit down with someone, whether it be a coach or an athlete or a parent or whoever, and conduct an hour session with them. It might just be a conversation. It might be a bit more structured, and they go away and you feel like, yeah, I've actually supported that person or helped them, overcome a problem or improve themselves in some sort of way. But yeah, I guess I got into stage two, in my view, looking back now, probably for the wrong reasons, because I was afraid of missing out. So I was doing my PhD. I was, getting significant research experience, providing a bit of support when at the FAW, but I kind of felt like, oh, I should be doing my applied work too. I'm missing out here by not doing something. And so I took on the stage two work, and it was quite a lot of work. I actually did end up, I did do the 2 year track, but I ended up doing it over about 3 years. And to be honest, 6 months into doing the stage two, I kind of put a pause on it while I was finishing up the PhD. So I started them both at the same time, but I started from a place of I need to be doing everything, a bit of everything, and then realized quickly 6 months in, actually, I'm getting good experience here, but this can wait till I finish the PhD and then I can come back to it. I don't need to. It's unrealistic of me to put all these demands on myself. But, I have huge respect for anyone who is able to balance all that. Or I know both of you doing the prof doc, it kind of combines the two. But for me at that time in my life, it was a good reflection for me to realize actually you don't need to be doing a little bit of everything all of the time.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
yeah.
I mean, I considered the prof doc, but I chose a Casey's route in the end. I mean, that's
Interesting.
probably why prof doc exists now, because you can combine the research and the practical side.
Yeah, yeah, and within a prof doc, it's probably more structured and streamlined, right? It's all coming through the one institution to meet your needs. Whereas I was trying to do the PhD with the FAW and at the University of South Wales, while also trying to do all the applied work and applied experience. I've always considered myself to be quite a productive, proactive kind of person like that. But I think it's also important to recognize when it's all a bit too much. I kind of felt like I wasn't maybe necessarily giving either of them my full attention or full quality. So kind of by putting that one, the stage two on hold while I finished the PhD, kind of helped me to really knuckle down and get the most out of both opportunities. Because as you both know, whether it's Casey's stage two, whatever prof doc, whatever you take, the reflections, the case studies, that's where all the kind of rich detail and the learning and self-development comes from. And I didn't feel like I was doing myself justice in those first couple of months when I was trying to juggle both.
I can totally resonate with it because you kind of structure yourself prof doc when prof doc hasn't existed yet. Because for me, it's Portsmouth helped me structured 1 week for research, 1 week for practice, but you have to structure everything by yourself. I just want to learn a little bit about your experience during that time. So how was your day-to-day like as a trainee? You have to focus on your PhD and your practice as well. How did you get your experience? How did you network with other people as a trainee?
Yeah, no, some really really good questions. In terms of structure, a lot of the time it would be, particularly when I was working with table tennis, would be kind of working in the evening times. Triathlon, I used to dedicate maybe half a day a week to go, and they're quite good triathlon in running like weekly multidisciplinary team meetings, and going along to a couple of early morning sessions to watch the athletes. So I guess I kind of structured it in terms of going to training sessions in the morning for triathlon, or in the evening with table tennis, and then doing the PhD kind of during. The reason I kind of started going along to a lot of those sessions were to try and just get a feel for the environment, become part of the furniture, as it were, just get the athletes to become familiar with me. And then I guess I did a lot of my reflecting or note taking probably on the move. One bit of really good bit of advice I got from my supervisor was just voice recording yourself. So I might leave a triathlon swim session at 9 a.m. and drive into the university or drive home to do some PhD work. And I just record what had happened, or my reflections or my thoughts, whether it be from being at a training session or being in a one-to-one session. And then I could kind of come back to that later. Because when I initially started, I was trying to just reflect on everything and keep notes of everything, which is just impossible. It's just not a realistic way of doing it. Whereas actually by kind of recording, almost word vomiting, if you like, kind of what I was on my mind, I could then come back to it later and kind of refine it down. And then in terms of networking, I think that was one of the strengths of doing the PhD and the stage two at the same time, because the PhD, I was fortunate enough to be funded through a scholarship scheme down here in Wales, and that allowed me to go to conferences. So I went to BPS conference one year. I went to a couple of FEPSAC conferences in Europe. It gave me the opportunity to present my research and to network with other people who were in similar positions to me, whether they be coming there from a research background, doing PhDs, other people who were early on in their applied experiences. So I got to develop a lot of networks through that. And then I guess the third way was I was fortunate enough to be group supervised with 2 other people who were going through stage 2 at the same time as me. So we'd have kind of like monthly meetups with us and our supervisor just to chat about what was going on and kind of reflect on key stuff that came up that month, maybe do a few role plays or chat things through. So it was kind of nice to feel supported in that way and to feel like there was other people in the same boat as me in going through that kind of qualification process. So yeah, that was kind of how I tried to balance it and tried to network a little bit.
Yes, thank you for that. Because most of our viewers, they're probably trainee or someone looking into the industry. So based on your experience looking how the industry evolved for the past 10 years, do you recommend new people joining to do which route? Like, because ProfDoc exists now, and also there are cases and BPS one. Which one do you think, or your pathway, PhD plus stage 2 at the same time, how would you recommend?
Yeah, it's I guess it's a really good question. It kind of depends on I like to think of it like you need to work backwards. I think a lot of people kind of do your master's, say, and then kind of just jump straight into the next thing because they feel it's what they should be doing, whether that's going in a PhD route or an applied practice route. I guess something that if I had my time again, what I do differently is maybe think about what I want my future to look like. Where do I see myself? Do I see myself as a researcher? Do I see myself as a practitioner? Do I see myself as doing both? Kind of try and make an active choice. I think I was offered the PhD opportunity through my research experiences, and that was fantastic. But then, like I said, I kind of was felt obliged to do the applied practice stuff because I knew it's what I wanted to do. But so for people looking to get into it, I would say just do your research into it. Look, I was very fortunate to have a supervisory team. My PhD were fantastic and a fantastic stage 2 supervisor, but kind of to do your research, to chat to other people who are going through the qualification or who are coming at the far end, chat to different potential supervisors to look at the type of support they provide. If you're looking at PhD opportunities, what's your area of interest or areas of interest? Don't just go and applying for everything in the hope of doing a PhD. Likewise with the prof doc, look into the different environments and all that type of thing as well. Is it an environment that's going to be the right one for you, the right support? Can you chat to other people around it? So yeah, just kind of, I guess my overall message is kind of take your time and have some patience with it. I think we're all it's becoming a more and more popular route. It's blown up so much even over the last 10 years since I did my master's that I think we're all just so eager to try and get ahead and get our foot in the door somewhere. But just taking the time to do your research and find the best place for you that's going to support you and your development, not just choosing somewhere for the sake of choosing somewhere, will probably be more.
Yeah, and like me and Can saw it, we did our masters together, and most of the students, I would say, were late 20s. They stepped away and then decided to come back to do the education and do the masters there. So there's not always a rush. Like you can become a sports psych at any age, and there's so many different options that if you're more interested into the research, then you might choose one route over the other, or if you want to do both, you do a prof doc. It depends, totally dependent on personal preference and what type of work they want to start doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And like I said, I was fortunate that I got a research assistant post first that gave me a taster of what research might be like. And because it's such a jump even to go from masters to PhD or to prof doc or to cases or stage 2, it's going from just having one project and a few classes to suddenly being in charge of this whole piece of work or this whole route of development. So absolutely taking your time and getting little tasters here and there, research internships or RA opportunities or other internship opportunities from applied perspective, just to dip your toe in the water to see if it's something for you. One thing I did mention was between finishing my master's and starting that research assistant position, I just worked in retail for a couple of years, just trying to figure things out, and there was moments where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I've got my master's, again, that desperation to almost get ahead, but actually those years were some of the most important for me, just to kind of really think about what I wanted and to kind of develop as a person as well as a practitioner, I suppose, and really figure out what my best next steps might look like. And then it made me appreciate it even more when I got the opportunity to go back into the field with that kind of, I guess, greater life experience, if you like, under my belt. So there's no one way of doing this, is there? There's a million different routes for different people, and everyone's their own individual. So it's just about doing what's right for you rather than what you feel like you should be doing to get ahead, as it were.
Yeah, I guess there is a real struggle and the reality as a trainee, as as a person in this industry, sometimes me and Ciara, we are working something that is not sports psychology relevant for our main job as our full-time job, and we have to use the funding from that job to fund sports psych, which we are doing some volunteer role. Sometimes that is quite frustrating. But yeah, for you, is there any advice or suggestion for trainee to find more opportunity? Like yourself, you work basically all the sports.
Yeah, well, I mean, my Welsh triathlon role that I start and my table tennis role that I started in at the start of my stage 2 were internships. So, and I totally understand it. It's frustrating sometimes to feel like I'm having to work for free here while I'm starting my training or doing my training. But I guess my piece of advice is just get your foot in the door somewhere. Like you're both working jobs and doing internships on the side. That's fantastic. If you can do those jobs for, a year and a half, whatever the case is, and really show your worth, then you put yourself in a place to have a conversation about payment. That's what happened with me. I got a year in. I've been doing the internship for a year. I was a solid year and a half into my training, and I just plucked up the courage to ask the coach and the performance director at the time the question around, look, I've been here for a year. You've given me feedback on how valuable you find it. The athletes talk about how valuable they find it. Is there a chance to provide some monetary support here to me for that? And it's only a little bit of part-time work, but it made all the difference. And what happens there then is if you can get these internships and kind of demonstrate your worth, then if they are in a position to pay you, all of a sudden you're being held to account more in a good way. Like as soon as someone starts paying you for something, it's kind of like, all right, where's our money going? What's it going towards? And all of a sudden I had even more buy-in from the coach and the performance director because they're like, all right, Alan's a paid member of the team now. How are we actually going to set up this psychology support? Whereas maybe for the internship here, I was kind of left to my own devices a little bit just to find my feet, and try and get established. So my advice to people trying to break into the field would be just think about, it depends where you're at, I suppose. If you've been doing a master's or a bit other bits and pieces, think about the context you have. So you'd be surprised about the people you probably already know within sport or even wider performance context that you can get in touch with that might know a person who might give you an opportunity. And then once you have your foot in the door, just try and demonstrate your worth, within the time that you have. I appreciate some people might be able to do an internship a couple of days a week. For other people, it might be just an evening a week, but just kind of trying to get your foot in the door and just demonstrate your worth in that time, and then that kind of builds the platform to go and have those conversations around getting paid and just building your experience and your portfolio from there. And obviously another big part of this work is then just word of mouth. A lot of clients I've ended up seeing one-to-one has come from word of mouth. You do some good work with a team and a parent recommends you to another parent, or a coach recommends you to another person, or someone comes looking for a sports psychologist through a physiotherapist you work with to help with injury recovery, and your name pops into their head, So just kind of putting yourself out there into those environments, you start to build those connections, you start to develop those relationships, and opportunities can snowball from there then as well.
Yeah, that's good advice. How would you say your approach differs? So, with some of the teams that you're working with, you mentioned that you worked with there for a couple of years. How would you say you were at the beginning and the approach you took, and how your practice changed after a while?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If it's kind of one of my big reflections from when I started at stage 2 in 2021, I think it was. And certainly in Welsh triathlon, because I use that example because I'm still there now, so it's probably a good one to use. The first 9 months, I want to say 6 to 9 months I was there, I didn't do any sports psychology work. So I showed up to the weekly meetings, I listened in, I tried to provide some input where I could. I went along to a gym session because it's a bit more of a casual session, quote unquote, where you can chat to athletes. I went along to a few swim sessions. I showed up, like I said, I tried to become part of the environment. I tried to have casual conversations with coaches and athletes because, not coming from a triathlon background, I knew very little about the sport. And if you know triathlon, they all talk about physiology and VO2 max and all these sports science terms, which I had no idea about. So I spent 6 to 9 months just trying to be in the environment and just become familiar with the environment. And I guess my reflection of those first 6 to 9 months were I was just constantly coming away going, I'm not doing anything. I'm in this environment. I'm not having an impact. Like I'm going to be found out here any day. They're going to turn around and go, Alan, you've been here 9 months and you haven't done anything. But that wasn't the case. Having those conversations further down the line made me realize that they appreciate me coming in, having a bit of patience and taking a bit of time and just having a bit of input. And then I guess once I kind of established myself a little bit, became comfortable with the day-to-day processes and stuff like that. I think my first client through that was one of the athletes suffered kind of a long-term injury. And because we'd had just casual conversations around training, and he knew me and he knew who I was, and we developed that relationship, he kind of reached out for a bit of support through one of the coaches. And then I went into that kind of first one-to-one session absolutely terrified, but probably did some really good work because I was super present. You know, you're kind of like, I was just sitting there going, I just need to listen to what he's got to say because I don't really know what I'm meant to be saying or what I'm meant to be doing. And actually, just by sitting there and listening to him, it started a really positive relationship, which then ended up in kind of some longer term support over the next year or so. And so then I guess over time, my role kind of changed from just being sitting in the environment to be able to have more meaningful conversations, contributing in these multidisciplinary team meetings, working on group projects with the members of staff. So, for example, future athletes who are struggling with niggles or injuries, working alongside the physiotherapist on, okay, what are the psychological barriers to recovery or the different stages, and how can we integrate them within their recovery plan, working with coaches to create pressure training. So particularly in triathlon, as they come into their race season in April or May, they switch from swimming in a pool to swimming open water. So just integrating some pressure training within those sessions, just doing more one-to-ones with an athlete. Again, word of mouth, because that first couple of sessions with that injured athlete went well. He then obviously, they all train as a group, even though it's an individual sport. So he feeds back to the group on how his sessions are going. Other people go, okay, maybe Alan's not totally clueless. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but and other people are. You develop that trust, and then you start to become more and more a part of that environment. You start to develop those relationships, and then in an organization where you're fortunate enough to be in and around every week, you can kind of dip in and out of having these kind of sessions with athletes as and when they need to. And even within those sessions, over time, I've probably moved from, okay, I'm meeting with this person. They've got a problem that I need to fix. I need to demonstrate my expertise. I need to have a solution for them after an hour, to just sitting back and just listening to them. Okay, why is this athlete showing up now? What's their story? If it's someone I've seen before, what did we talk about previously? Are we picking up on that same thing again, or is it a different thing that's going on for them? Because sometimes someone just needs a chat. Someone just needs someone just to be a sounding board, just to vent to. Certainly at the higher level of athletes I've worked with in that squad, a lot of times they already have their own solutions. They just want to run it by someone, or they just want to talk it through. Or they certainly have all the skills to be able to talk it through and work on it. And some of the younger ones, you're kind of maybe supporting them a bit more. But that's kind of the way I've gone. I've gone from seeing myself as I need to be the one with all the solutions here to give to them, to, well, actually, no, we're a team on this, and they know themselves better than I'll ever know them. So they're the expert on themselves. I'm here to ask the right questions and help them come up with the solutions. And yeah, just obviously working from an individual and also a wider team or organizational perspective, and trying to have a more positive impact on the environment as a whole, not just the individuals within it. So that's probably within triathlon anyway, but more broadly how my approach has changed over those kind of 4.5 years.
Yeah, it definitely highlights that the relationships are at the core of everything. Being present, building that trust, then you're more likely to get work from that.
100%.
Sorry. Yes, no, sorry. Thank you for sharing that. It is sometimes very uncomfortable for us to admit that we have basically contributed nothing. I have seen SNC coach, they've done a lot, physio, they have done a lot of work, and we just stand aside. It seems like we're doing nothing, but we have done, for you to have done a PhD, we have studied so much, but we just don't have the buy-in. So what do you think it clicked with you and the team, and all of a sudden people start coming to see you? Do you think it is because you start to become a paid staff member, or you have done some meaningful workshop, or something happened to the team, and all of a sudden everyone just, oh, Alan, we have to go to him for this sort of work? Like,
yeah, in the triathlon scenario, I think it was just getting that first opportunity with an athlete after being there for 6, 7, 8 months. You become a familiar face and someone they can go to for support. Mm-hmm. So it's that injured athlete who just came along to me, and we had that first meeting. And if on a different day, if I tried to force too much on him, or try to bring out my knowledge of injury psychology literature or something like that, it might have driven him away, and it might have led to a different conversation. But because I think on that day, because I was so nervous, I managed to just put everything aside and just go, right, just, if you don't know what else to do, just listen to the person in front of you, like you would do in any other conversation. Just actively listen. what are they saying? What are they not saying? What's their body language like? What kind of pics can we pick up on? Ask a few follow-up questions. Someone in that position just wanted someone to care and to listen and to be there, because he was, at the time, that athlete was feeling a bit isolated from the rest of the squad because they'd been out injured for a few months. So they were just, again, going back to this idea of relationships, they were just looking for someone to listen. And then that developed that bit of trust, and that they happen to be one of the more senior athletes within that squad as well. So if you're thinking about the relationship dynamics of the squad, once we started working together for a couple of sessions, it kind of, whether they explicitly fed this back or it's just more of an implicit thing, I don't know, but it kind of just naturally opened others up to, oh, okay, actually there's psychology isn't just about, if something's wrong or whatever, I can actually go to this person and just have conversations or just, pick their brain or whatever. So it didn't necessarily lead to a flood of one-to-ones, but it did lead to a lot more 5-10 minute conversations around the gym, at the side of the pool or at the side of the track or whatever. People just trust you more, feel more comfortable around you, start to open up a little more. And then a 5-minute conversation might lead to a follow-on meeting, or it might not. And they might get the support they need, but you just become a more natural part of the environment. And then payment comes as a result of that down the line. Like I said, once you've been in that environment, you're starting to have those conversations and people are starting to feed that stuff back, and you're having reviews with coaches and stuff. That's when, in my view, I was able to pluck up the courage to ask, is there any chance of getting a bit of payment for this work? Because you can start to see the impact and the worth I can have. But it's about having patience and trusting that even if you feel like you're doing nothing, you're doing something, just by being there, just by showing up, just by being around the environment. What athletes don't want is for you to come across as, I don't know if desperate's the right word, but keen to intervene at every opportunity or show your knowledge or show your worth. That kind of drives people away. You need to let them come to you. What's the phrase? People need to know you care before you care. They care what you know. Just showing up and caring and being around and being there to support them and treating them, like I said, as people first, athletes second. I think it's a massive part of my philosophy, and I think that's what kind of, when I got me in that environment, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, I was just about to say it's a snowball effect. You got to have a lot of patience, and then something clicks, and all of a sudden you like all that hard work paid off.
Yeah.
Would you say there was so much stigma around the teams that you worked with?
I don't think stigma is the right word. I think the environments I've worked in have been quite good. I think sometimes people aren't quite sure of what your remit is. And that's probably on me as much as anything. That's another reflection probably for me, for my training, was it took me a while to actually sit down and establish clear boundaries maybe in those first year roles around, I'm a trainee sports psychologist, and here's what that means, here's what I can do, here's what I can't do. Probably because I was just so happy to get it was an incredible internship opportunity working with Team Wales and the build up to the Commonwealths, So I think I was just happy to be there. I was like, yeah, I'll take that. I'll come through the door. We had a brief chat about, oh, come on down into the environment and see what you think. And then I kind of just hit the ground running from there. So I think it was only a couple of months in, once I started doing some one-to-one work with athletes and stuff like that, that this kind of stuff came up, where there was one or two athletes maybe who were struggling with more personal things, and the coach might mention it, going, "Oh, it's such and such is struggling to balance sport and uni, or they're having struggles in a relationship outside of the sport or whatever." But I know that's not really your thing. You're more performance, so that's fine. We'll help them manage that, or we'll find someone else for that. And so that was kind of where it came up with, like, okay, actually, I haven't really taken the time here to talk about what I can and can't do. So I was very much like, look, to me, performance is everything inside and outside of sport. Like I said to you a second ago, I see them as a person first, athlete second. So yes, absolutely, I'm here to help with performance, but I'm also here to support their well-being, because the two for me go hand in hand. If someone's struggling with their well-being, they're not going to perform well. If someone's struggling with their performance, it's going to impact on their well-being, pure and simple. And granted, also we have to draw boundaries in terms of when clinical issues show up or arise, then obviously that's not within my remit and having the proper referral processes. But that was definitely a reflection I had, was kind of, okay, when I go coming into these environments, and I've done it more now in other places I've gone into work in, it's kind of like, and I guess it comes with experience. You feel more comfortable in yourself, in who you are and what you actually bring to the table. Whereas actually that time, I don't think I really was sure what I was bringing to the table. So I was just happy to be in that environment. And then these issues kind of reactively cropped up and I had to fight fires, as it were. Whereas going forward now, any organization I go into, I start with, I'm a sports psychologist. Here's what that means. Here's what I can do. Here's what's outside my remit. Here's how we refer on if we need, just really setting up clear boundaries around confidentiality and things like that as well. Around here's what I am or am willing to share, all of those types of things, which I think you read about through your masters and stuff like that, but until you're actually in that scenario, you don't appreciate how challenging they can be to navigate or how many grey areas there can be sometimes, you know?
Yeah, and especially
Yeah.
I feel like the countless times I've had to explain to athletes what sports psychology is and what it isn't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not here to psychoanalyze you or anything like that. It's like setting out what your role is and how you can help them. And then
Yeah.
they feel more at ease afterwards.
100%. Or sometimes just being a little bit playful with it as well, if there's any potential stigma showing up. So I take a few notes, you know, when I'm meeting with athlete, partly obviously for myself for good practice, but also I like to give each person I work with like a little short summary after the meeting of, you know, here's what we talked about, here's some key work-ons, etc., just so they're not having to go, I try to remember everything. And some of the triathletes in the squad used to joke. I used to have a little black notebook, and I'd show up to train. And be like, "Oh, here's Alan with his, you know, his little black book. He could put us all away for a few years with the stuff he's got in there. You know, all these kind of little jokes or quirks. So sometimes just kind of making a bit of a joke out of it. Again, it's just about developing that trust, developing that relationship, and making people feel more comfortable, not coming across as super serious or making athletes feel like they can only come and talk to me about sports psychology. Sometimes it's just about remembering, oh, they had that race at the weekend, or you know, they went to that match of the week, you know, asking them stuff from their personal lives and stuff just to get the ball rolling and get people talking can be really, really important as well to overcome some of those stigmas.
So setting a really clear boundary is just gonna help your work in the down the line. Yeah, so yeah, I do have a question. As a trainee, sometimes we're just so grateful for an opportunity in the first place. But if we need to go into the work and set some boundaries, what we can do, what we cannot do, like, do you have any advice for trainee to be to do that and be that in that position? Because I feel like as a trainee, we don't have that much confidence, and we're already grateful to have the opportunity in the first place. And yeah, sometimes the opportunity that we have is with the grassroots club. We probably are the first person they go to for mental health related, any issue related to that. So yeah, how would you advise trainee to set clear boundaries?
Yeah, no, it's really good, really, really good question. And I appreciate it because I was in that position too, being super keen, super eager just to get in and not really giving this kind of stuff a second thought. I guess the simplest way of doing it is just going and asking to have a sit down conversation with the person who's bringing you into that environment, whether that be a coach or a performance director or a team captain or whoever. And I think this applies both to when you're doing one-to-one work or working in a team, but also when you're coming in to do workshops or things like that as well. Because sometimes we think when someone tells us, "Oh, just come in and do a workshop," or "Can you provide us with some sports psychology support?" You can do whatever you want. You know, it's a complete blank page. Do whatever you want. We kind of sit and go, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. They're so open. They're so receptive." But actually, sometimes those people are the ones who sit down and you do the workshop or you start to provide the support you want to provide, and after a week or so, they go, "Oh, this actually wasn't really what I expected." Or 6 months down, this wasn't really what I expected. Or I don't think we're going to continue this on. Whereas actually, if we just take the time, and again, this is something I've learned by trial and error, if we just take the time at the start to go, "That's fantastic. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do whatever it may." But actually, what does sports psychology mean to you? What does it look like to you? Have you had sports psychology support before? If you have, what went well? What didn't go well? Just asking all these questions so that you're both really clear about what you want out of that support. And then you can sit down if they're very much like if it goes against your own philosophy of practice, your own interests. So if they're just like, "Oh, it's all about performance. I just need to get them tougher and more resilient. Whatever the cost. Those kind of things." Then it's about obviously having the courage to stand up and say, "Well, actually, maybe this opportunity isn't right for me," which I appreciate is much more difficult for a trainee starting out looking for internships, looking for opportunities. But if I'm just thinking, if I'm a coach or if I'm someone looking to hire someone, I appreciate that conversation too. They might not think it at the time, but when you actually sit down and talk it through, at least then there's much more clarity around everyone's responsibilities, everyone's expectations. You're less likely to have that messy conversation a couple of weeks in where you've just had to one with a player who's struggling, who wants to keep it between you, and that's your confidentiality policy. But the coach is asking you what was said in that meeting, and you haven't established that boundary. They're almost entitled to ask that, and then you can lead to a messy situation and falling out with a coach or a breakdown in a relationship. And so just having that, it sounds simple, but it can make a massive difference. Just kind of sitting down at the start with whoever's bringing you, the gatekeeper, if you like, whoever's bringing you into that environment, just saying, what exactly does sports psychology mean to you? What might that look like? what would you like out of this? And then kind of having that collaboration to talk about, well, here's who I am, here's my approach, here's how I envisage us maybe working together. And then you can kind of almost come up with a plan together, whether that be through one-to-one support or workshops, or just saying, I need to just be in and around the environment for the first month or two, if that's okay with you. Just I want to come in and observe and see what's going on and chat to people and get a feel for the place. Again, it depends on the role. I appreciate sometimes you're in an organization, sometimes you're just being brought in to deliver a couple of workshops, but you can still have that conversation with whoever the gatekeeper is.
Yeah, it can be scary at first, but it will save you down the line.
100%, 100%. Because everyone's eager. You're eager to get started as a trainee. They're eager to get someone in the door. And like I said, if you can avoid it, you don't want to end up in that position where you're fighting fires going, well, actually, this isn't really the way I work. And they're like, well, you never mentioned it, and it can just get a bit tricky, and you can paint yourself into a corner a little bit sometimes.
And I think that's the perfect opportunity when you are going into those situations. As trainees, we have our supervisors. We can
Absolutely.
speak to other people who have gone through that and just ask them how have they approached it, how have they dealt with it, and then you get tips and advice from other people, and you can go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point actually here. And just to add on to that, I think it's okay to say I don't know. So, if someone's asking you, oh, do you know such and such about this, or can you provide a bit of support in that? It's okay in the moment to say, I don't know, but I'll find out, whether that's going away and doing your own research into something or talking to a supervisor or someone else with the experience. Again, something else I've definitely learned through trial and error, particularly when we're early career trainees. I think we can be so desperate to show our knowledge that someone brings up a topic or a subject or something, and we try and provide them with all the answers in the moment, and we get found out pretty quickly. Whereas actually just being able to say, I don't know, but I'll find out for you, and going and having that conversation with your supervisor, whether it be about a topic you don't know a lot about, or a situation you're like, this doesn't feel quite right from an ethical or a boundaries perspective, just pressing pause and going away and having that conversation can be really, really useful, and a really good reflection and learning opportunity as well.
Yeah, and then in our training experience, we have to do a lot of reflections, and there's lots of opportunities for that.
Yeah, that was a positive spin I always put on it, was when if something didn't quite go right, or if something went a little bit wrong, or a conversation came up that I wasn't expecting, I always just pocket in the back of my mind, still be a great reflection, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's one of those things you've got to note it down when you think of it, otherwise you'll forget about it.
Exactly. It disappears pretty quickly, which goes back to my point about voice recording. I think that just really helped me if I was finishing up a session and I had a good, it can be good too, right? I don't want to just portray this as everything's a challenge. Sometimes you have the best conversations, or you've had a one-off session with an athlete and it's gone brilliantly and they've taken loads away from it when you didn't expect it. But like I said, just sometimes I find myself rushing to my car or something just so I could click record and just talk through exactly what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, why I think it worked or why it didn't work or whatever. And then sometimes I might even just leave it for 24 hours. I was like, right, I've got that down and I'll come back. And then 24 hours, I can kind of look at it with a clearer head. I've got the base knowledge or the notes from my voice note, but then I can kind of filter it into a more coherent reflection without feeling the pressure to write it up immediately,
Yeah, that's a good point. If we bring it up to how your practice is going now, and since your research, are you happy in your position now, or are you hoping to expand and work with more teams?
Yeah, I'm very, very happy in my position now. I was quite fortunate when I finished my PhD to be able to get an opportunity as a senior research assistant with the Football Association of Wales Research Centre, which is a pure research position. So I've been very fortunate over the last 2 years to be able to work on a lot of great projects, not just in psychology, across the organization. So we've done projects on coach education, on rehabilitation from ACL injuries, on continue on my PhD work around developing mental toughness, a whole host of different areas, which I've felt really fortunate to be involved in, alongside trying to continue to grow my own applied practice, working through a couple of consultancy companies and doing some of my own private practice of one-to-one work. So yeah, I think long term, one of my ambitions is to try and grow my own consultancy business. As I said, I've been having a few productive meetings lately with mentors and people like that who've kind of given me that advice of just go back through your list of contacts, go back through, you've made so many connections and know so many people over the last number of years who you might be able to get in touch with and just offer your services, or if they aren't in a position to offer you anything, they might know someone who might need something. And again, just that kind of snowball effect. So I think in the medium term, kind of setting up my own consultancy and going into the world of applied practice is something I'd really like to do, alongside continuing some of that research work. Because to me, I think this is just my view, but applied practice drives everything. If I ended up going back into doing a bit of lecturing, I think having your applied practice background and being able to bring those lectures and that material to life is key. I think if I'm continue on in research, having that applied experience and being able to bridge that research applied gap is massive as well. Not just kind of, for me, going down just one of those channels wouldn't be fulfilling for me. I want to be able to do at least two of them to kind of like mix and match and be able to drive the applied field with my research knowledge, but also able to drive the research with my applied knowledge, which I don't think really gets talked about enough.
Yeah, it's good to have a bit of experience in both.
Yeah,
I've got
absolutely.
a
Absolutely.
question. Did you see yourself in this position when you first started your training route?
In the position I'm in now.
Yeah, where did you think you were going to be when you
Yeah,
first
it's
started your
funny.
training route?
I don't know how you both found it coming out of masters, but I think when I finished my masters, I thought I'd walk into a job, to be honest. I thought I've done my sports psychology masters. Yeah, I'll go do the stage two, but I've got a psychology undergrad under my belt. I've got a master's under my belt. I was fortunate enough to get a placement when I was at Liverpool John Moores with Everton women's academy team. So I was like, I've got the masters, I've got some experience, and like I'm gonna walk into a job. Like I've got loads of stuff here. And I think it's just been over time that I've kind of realized, it's absolutely challenging, but hugely rewarding at the same time. So no, I wouldn't have seen myself here like when I started out my training, but I probably would have seen myself in applied position a lot sooner at that time, just because of, you're coming out a bit wet behind the ears for me anyway, out of my masters. I was just, a little bit clueless in that regard. But like looking back now, I always had the ambition of wanting to go and work in applied practice, to go and, establish myself in the research field and the applied practice field. And I feel like I'm slowly starting to do that. As I said at the start, I don't by no means am I anywhere near the finished article. I'm still learning every day. I'll go away and reflect probably from this conversation about what I've taken away from talking to you both. I'm just at that kind of start of that training journey, in my view. Yeah, you get the qualification, but it's a competency based qualification, right? It means you're competent enough to go and work in the field. It doesn't mean that you are the be all and end all or any by any means. So I still see it as I'm very much kind of starting out in that journey. And yeah, I guess linked into that point, kind of going off on a tangent now, but linked into that point, we talk about the importance of supervision during your training. I think that's massive. But I think even when you get towards the end or finish your training, finding a mentor or someone, a sounding board, someone you can continue to bounce ideas off and learn and develop with is hugely important as well throughout our careers. So yeah, if I was to look back at myself, 10 years ago, would be very proud of where I am now, but it would probably be a bit of a shock to a system, all the kind of the hurdles and the challenges and also enjoyable experiences I've gone through to kind of get to where I am and kind of establish myself.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's really wonderful. Just one last question before we end today's podcast. I just want to know, can you share a little bit how is it like to be at the Olympic game? I guess it is the holy grail for all the sports side.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the nature of psychology, I didn't get to go to the actual Olympic Games itself, but it was just supporting a couple of athletes who competed at the Commonwealths first and then also at the Olympic Games. The Commonwealths was fantastic because it was being based in Wales, it was one opportunity for a lot of our athletes to represent Wales rather than just Team GB. So getting to put on that actual Welsh kit was a massive moment of pride for them. And then, yeah, supporting athletes at the Olympics was absolutely fantastic. It was a goal of his to get there for as long as I'd been working with them in the centre. And so being a very minute, small part of that support team that helped them achieve that dream was absolutely fantastic and hugely rewarding and hugely fulfilling, and something we're hopefully going to do again now. We've got two world-class funded athletes in Welsh triathlon at the moment who've both got ambitions, I think, of getting to the next Olympics. So hopefully it's kind of just spurred on other people, created that environment where people kind of feel inspired and created that kind of clear pathway for people to see that actually if you put in the work and the application and get the right support and do the right things, there is that opportunity there for you. But yeah, from a personal perspective, it was fantastic to feel like I was just a small part of that.
Yeah, that's really good. What an experience.
Yeah.
And if people wanted to reach out to you after this, would that be okay? How can they contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, a number of different ways you can contact me. Probably best way is through LinkedIn, Alan McKay. I think Dr. Alan McKay on there. I've worked hard enough for the title, so I figured I'd stick it on the front of my name on LinkedIn. And feel free to drop me a message if there's anything from this conversation that resonated or people wanted to follow up on. I'd be more than happy to, or just give me a kind of connect and kind of follow what we're doing. As I said, the other place is the kind of Football Association of Wales Research Centre is something I've worked on alongside Professor Brendan Cropley. So check out that page too. We try and share links to the work we're doing, and we also like have a couple of different videos or different bits that people can engage with on there if they want to see kind of the work that we've got going on, and if they have any other projects they want to look in or help us get involved with, then we're always willing to listen to people and try and provide opportunities as well if we can. So yeah, they'd probably be the main places to get in touch, because like I said, it's all about relationships, not just between psychs and athletes, but between psychs and fellow psychs. So I know what it's like to be in the position at the start of your career to feel like it's a bit overwhelming and there's these different avenues that open in front of you, but you're not quite sure where to start. So I want to be able to give back and support others who are in the same position as me. It's going to make me sound old now, having said I've been doing this for 10 years. But yeah, more than happy to support her. If anyone wants to reach out or connect, then yeah, always open to that.
Thank you.
No worries.